So in the second video, we're going to talk about the discriminant. And the discriminant, it's actually part of the quadratic formula, but it's not going to give you what the solution to the equation is. Instead, it's going to tell you how many solutions it has. So for most of the problems that we solve with the quadratic, you have two answers. A lot of times it's plus and minus the same number, or when we use the factoring method, we get two completely different answers. So most of the time there's two answers, but sometimes there's only one. When we square root 0, for example, the square root of 0 is just 0. That's one answer. We don't have positive 0 and negative 0. It's just 0. So there's every once in a while we'll just get one answer, and then sometimes we'll get no solutions, right? If we had to square root a negative at any point in the process, then that's a no solutions. We don't know, or there wouldn't be an answer there. So the discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula that's under the radical, and it's the, oops, turn my pen on, b squared minus 4ac. And that's it. That's the discriminant. So hopefully you watched the first part of the notes off of quadratic formula, and you should recognize that, hey, that is everything underneath the radical in the quadratic formula. And you want to keep that in mind so that you can answer, does this quadratic equation have one solution, two solutions, or none? So if you were to evaluate b squared minus 4ac and you get a positive number, well, if you take the square root of any positive number, you get two answers. So if your discriminant is positive, you get two solutions, because when you square root it, you're going to get plus and minus something, okay, depending on what was underneath the radical, as long as it was positive. It might not be a whole number, could still have a radical in it, but it gives you two answers. Okay, so what about if I did b squared minus 4ac and I got 0? Okay, if underneath the radical becomes 0, the square root of 0 is 0. Now that doesn't mean there's no solutions. That means the only answer is 0. So that has one solution. And I know the grammar on that problem isn't exactly proper, but it's to kind of throw you off the guessing scent. Okay, so if your discriminant becomes 0, you have one solution to that problem. Okay, then if you end up with a negative, then you have 0 solutions, or you could say no solutions. Either one is fine, because we can't square root a negative yet. You guys can learn that in Algebra 2, but in Algebra 1, we can't square root negatives yet. So let's go through and kind of talk about what this means, because this is kind of an abstract thought to go through it. So just like with quadratic formula, okay, you need to identify your A, B, and C, and I think by now you're probably good enough at that we don't have to list it out. So b squared, b in this case is 4, so 4 squared is 16, minus the 4 that's always in the problem, times A, which is 3, times C, which is 5. So that is the b squared minus 4 times A times C. Now if I evaluate that, I get 16, and then negative 4 times 3 times 5 is a negative 60. Simplify that, and I get negative 44. So now I go, okay, well, what does that mean? Negative 44 is not my answer. To make sure that you guys understand that. That's just the discriminant. That is what you would get under the square root sign in the quadratic formula. So if we have a negative under the square root, how many answers are we going to get? None. You can't square root a negative. So this is an example where this original problem has no real solutions. Okay, so the discriminant only tells you how many answers there are, not what the answer is. You'd have to actually solve it using one of the 3 methods that we've gone through to be able to tell me what the actual answers are. Okay, same thing with 8. Okay, go through and plug in your A, B, and C. So B this time is negative 4. But even if I square a negative, -4 times -4 is still a positive 16, minus the 4 that's always in the problem, times A, which is 1, times C, which is 4. -4 times 1 times 4 is -16. And if I subtract, I get 0. So again, that's not my answer, that's my discriminant. If the discriminant is 0, so if I take the square root of 0, how many answers do I get? Only one. I get one solution. So again, the solution is not 0. There's just only one solution to that problem. Okay, the discriminant is 0. Okay, so now we're going to look at 9. Now, 9's a little different because I only have 2 terms there. I don't have 3. So going back to the fact that we know we're working with ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. I know A is 1. I know B, that's 8, but where's C? It's not there. If it's not there, we know that C is 0. So we need to take that into account when I plug it into the discriminant. So b squared, that'd be 8 squared. So we're looking at 64 minus the 4 that's always in the problem, times A, which is 1, times C, which is 0. So that results in 64 minus 0, which is 64. So again, that's the discriminant. If I square root that number, how many answers do I get? 2. You get positive 8 and negative 8. Again, none of those are the actual answer, but there are 2 solutions to that problem. Okay, what I want you to do now is I want you to pause the video and I want you to try the last 3. Try it on your own, and after you've actually attempted it, come back to this video and check your work. Okay, so for 10, b squared would be 16 minus the 4 that's always there. A is 4, C is 1. So we end up with 16 minus 16, which is 0, which means one solution. Because the square root of 0 is only going to give me 0. Oh, picking colors is really hard. Orange. Now for 11, 11 is similar to 9, but which term is missing, or which one is 0? That would be B. A is 1. There isn't a B term. There's no X term there. And your constant is 3. So when I plug this in, well, b squared is still just 0. Minus 4 times 1 times 3. Well, that's 0 minus 12, which is negative 12. And if that's my discriminant, I have no real solutions. Okay, last one. On here, b squared would be 4 minus the 4 that's always in there, times A, which is 3, times C, which is negative 1. So when I simplify, I'm going to have a sign change. Negative 4 times 3 times negative 1 is positive 12. Positive 12 because we have the negative times the negative. So now I have 16. 16 is a positive number, so that's going to give me 2 solutions. Again, I can reason through that because the square root of 16 would be positive 4 and negative 4, so that's 2 answers. Okay, so I know this is kind of an abstract thought. Okay, if you need to replay the video, replay it as many times as you need to, and then if you need more help, make sure you attend a conference with your teacher.